In 120 days and then some, this year's legislative session opened and closed, and a lot happened. Nevada lawmakers passed over 600 bills. The governor vetoed a record 75 of them, and we got inundated with one too many wonky baseball references. Lucky for us, today on CityCast Las Vegas, we've got contributor and Nevada Current reporter April Corbin Girnus back on deck to help us break it down. So, what were the most important bills that will affect Southern Nevadans, and how will this session go down in the history books? Spoiler, there's going to be a reference to Dante's Inferno. It's Thursday, June 22nd. I'm Dayvid Figler, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. Welcome back to CityCast Las Vegas. April Corbin Girnus of the Nevada Current.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's been a long 120 plus days. April, if you had to describe the 2023 legislative session with a movie title, what would it be, and why?
So this might be slightly deep cut for people, but this...
Oh, I like the deep cuts.
Yeah, the movie I think of is As Above, So Below, which is a found footage horror movie.
Oh my God.
From about a decade ago. So plot synopsis, no spoilers. No, it's, a group of people traverse the catacombs underneath Paris, sort of seeking treasure. And instead they find themselves in hell, specifically like Dante's Inferno levels of hell. That's what this legislative session reminded me of. Just sort of going through hell looking for treasure and sort of emerging battered and beaten and without much treasure at all.
I don't have as good ones as you do. Maybe A League of Their Own might be a good one if I had to do a baseball movie. Maybe The Hangover, maybe The Binge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just get into what the legislators did do. What bills passed that you think have the biggest impact on us here in Las Vegas in the Big Valley?
Yeah, and I told myself I was not going to come on here and be a buzzkill and just talk about bad things. So I'm going to start with a bill that I think is pretty wonderful and important, even if it's just a subsect of Southern Nevada. So there was a bill to appropriate money to help relocate residents of Windsor Park, which is a neighborhood in North Las Vegas that has just sort of been devastated, and the land is not suitable for homes, and the homes are crumbling, but there are people who are still living there, and they need help to move somewhere where their homes won't fall apart. And so it's like $25 million from sort of coronavirus relief funds, the federal funds, and like $12 million from the general fund, which has to be repaid sort of slowly back by the city of North Las Vegas. But hopefully that sort of brings relief to a neighborhood that has been blighted and sort of let crumble over several decades.
Yeah, the conversation around Windsor Park was really interesting. Just the devastation of how unsuitable it is for a lot of houses that have been built, and the fact that real estate agents are still getting new people to invest in there when all the disclosures weren't made, and the lack of repairs. Okay, April, what other good impact on Southern Nevada bills got passed?
And I think maybe this it's controversial in terms of whether or not this will be a good impact. One of the most substantial things that they passed in the session was they created a $100 million matching fund to support a homelessness sort of support campus. At worst, that is another sort of courtyard of hope or whatever it's called in downtown, where they're just removing all of the homeless people, the vagrants from the Strip, and housing them somewhere out of sight, out of mind. At best, it's a model where people can get resources and help. What that looks like in reality will remain to be seen as it's sort of developed. But that is the start of something, good or bad, we saw this session, yeah.
So did they put the $100 million matching funds before the cart? In other words, is there definitely only one place for that money to be spent? Or does the bill allow for a little flexibility on how best to serve the population of unhoused people?
Unfortunately, the $100 million matching fund is it funds the infrastructure to create a campus that hosts that stuff. So the money for the additional resources that would be offered within the homeless corridor campus thing that they create would sort of have to come from other places, which is problematic. And certainly we didn't see a robust discussion about this bill because it was introduced really late and suddenly and had really quick hearings. So people couldn't sort of process it and come up with opinions on it and push back on it. But that's something we'll see hopefully going forward. So it's how optimistic you want to be, I guess.
All right, April, we mentioned two big bills. Any others that impacted Southern Nevada that are worth noting?
We saw a lot of very hyper-specific things that could impact people. We had some Medicaid coverage expansion to like postpartum women and autistic individuals, and abortion was protected further this legislative session, which obviously that's not sort of Southern Nevada specific, but is an important issue to a lot of people. So that was good. If you plan on dying and you want to be composted instead of buried, that passed this session. I know you guys have covered that in an episode, so that's a good follow-up for people who care about that. But
I'm also thinking about the school board and maybe the change of composition of the school board, which really is going to impact us down here a lot because it's so vocal. Mm-hmm. What exactly did they do? Could you maybe lay that out?
I believe they changed the makeup so there'll be appointed members on the board rather than fully elected, which is what it currently is.
And what do you think that they thought that would do?
I think they thought that would sort of bring grown-ups to the table. I don't know that they worded it that way, but that's kind of what I think it translates to, where they would bring.
The pitch.
Yeah, they would bring more expertise to the board. Sort of, they like to make a comparison to the Board of Education, which is an appointed board. So people who are appointed to the Board of Education at the state level typically have some kind of background in education. Like they've worked in education policy before. They have experience that's sort of directly related. And one of the criticisms of the Clark County School Board in particular has been that it's filled with people who have no direct experience with education. Like some of them don't have like higher education degrees, or they were teachers, or they're like dental assistants and things like that, which are valuable, important careers, but not necessarily
participating.
Citizens. And that's the debate. Do you need that kind of expertise for the board, or is it better to be an everyday citizen? And that's something we've wrestled with.
Right. Do you need to be an economist to be able to espouse economic theories, right?
Exactly. So we'll see. Again, that's a thing that could have a potential impact, but also could largely be a distraction from the real issues that are happening within the school board. But there was a lot of education money that was flowing through. There is $200 billion extra dollars that were given to the per pupil fund, which should have an impact at our schools, giving better resources and hopefully raises. There was an additional fund that was passed of a $250 million of matching fund that would sort of help school districts give raises to teachers.
Yeah.
But again, I think unfortunately, we might see some pushback from that. And that still has to play out at the district level and at the union collective bargaining level. So whether or not that translates, because I'll tell you now, the school district will argue that they cannot raise money using a one-time fund because it's unsustainable past next year. So it's going to be a fight, I think. So whether or not that makes an impact remains to be seen.
Sure. But certainly with Clark County School District being the fifth largest in the country, and obviously the big one here in Nevada, all those bills that you just mentioned are going to have some sort of impact. The question is in what direction. So
exactly.
So many unknowns, known unknowns. Hey, Dayvid Figler here with a reminder that this show you're listening to reaches Las Vegas's most passionate audience. CityCast Las Vegas reaches the people who want to live here, not just the people who happen to live here. They're the movers and shakers and the most engaged in Las Vegas life. CityCast Las Vegas listeners are always looking for new restaurants and local events, and they care about what's happening in their community. Get your message out to the city's best audience right now with an ad right here on the CityCast Las Vegas podcast. Learn more at lasvegas.citycast.fm/advertise or email us at ads@citycast.fm. All right, April, we talked about the bills that passed. I know there's a lot that were vetoed, a record number for a single session. So what bills passed through the legislature but were vetoed that could have had an impact down here in Southern Nevada?
There's several housing bills that were vetoed. They were ranging things from like rent caps for seniors. So not rent caps for everybody, not rent control for everybody, but just for senior citizens who are typically on, fixed incomes. Lombardo vetoed that. There were other tenant protections around sort of the eviction process, around transparency and fees, and around eviction programs that would help. A lot of that stuff was vetoed. So the housing advocates and people who are worried about that are very concerned about what happens when sort of our COVID relief money ends up and prices don't seem to be going down. So I think there's a lot of concern about some of the housing stuff that has been vetoed.
And I want to just focus on housing for a second, because I think that makes a really good point, because certainly there are housing concerns throughout the state, up in Washoe, throughout the rurals, et cetera. But I think Clark County really has a magnified version of that, simply because of the number of people who live down here and the number of evictions that have been going through and how easy it is to, for a landlord to be able to get a tenant out or at least scare them out.
Absolutely. And it's compounded because people are still moving here, right? Like
Right.
We're not a fixed area. We're still one of the fastest. We're not the fastest at the moment. We're still really high up there. So people are still moving here from places like California, wherever. And we're going to see more of that.
Besides housing, April, what other sort of Southern Nevada impact bills wound up getting vetoed by Governor Lombardo?
I think one of the most surprising ones was sort of free breakfast and lunch for school children. For K-12, was expanding it. Obviously, Lombardo vetoed it on the grounds that it sort of cost money. But it's a weird thing.
He vetoed something because it costs money, because nothing else costs money in the legislature.
Yeah, and I just feel like, even just politically and sort of from the public, like saying, no, we don't want to feed kids is like a bad look. But like drawing the line at feeding children who are hungry at school, it's a weird line to draw, I think.
Well, taking all that into account, what did this session tell us about Governor Lombardo's approach and our divided government with, both houses of the legislature in the hands of the Democrats, but not with the supermajority? Yeah,
exactly. So, I think the interesting thing about the election of Joe Lombardo in general was that he did not have a legislative past. Like he was an elected official. He was a sheriff, but obviously not passing laws and passing bills. So we didn't sort of have his history. So I think everybody went into this session wondering what kind of governor he was going to be, whether or not he was going to try and be more of a Sandoval who has the reputation of being, a compromiser and working across the aisle, is generally liked by everybody, or whether or not he was going to be sort of more of a wild card and be more of a hot mess or whatever, and kind of have a little bit more of a tumultuous time. And I think what we've seen, and he sort of made clear, was that he is not afraid of that veto pen, and that he blew the record out of the water. It was like 48, now he's like 75 is the new all-time record for vetoes in a single session. That's a really high number. And a lot of the vetoes sort of didn't make sense to a lot of people, right? So like he signed 2 bills that were sort of helping the trans community, right? It was gender affirming care, barring insurance companies from discriminating against gender affirming care. He passed that. He passed a bill that forces the Department of Corrections to have policies related to trans people. Again, something that the trans community and advocates had sort of been pushing for. 2 good bills.
But came right through. And then he also got pushback on that from his conservative base.
But then on the other end, he vetoed a bill that was related to protecting the providers of gender affirming care from being like prosecuted in other states and being discriminated against by licensing boards and things, which it's all in the same vein. So, like, why do you draw that line? And certainly he tried to explain it in sort of veto messages. But I think it was, to a lot of people, sort of haphazard. And we saw a lot of rumors about vetoes coming just because people were being petty and sort of, there was a lack of, I think, continuity in terms of logical thought.
Well, I mean, that's not unique to this session.
Yeah. I think there's a case to be made that Lombardo needs to market himself as the person who says no to the Democrats, right? Remember, he was in a really competitive primary race that had a lot of people, and he was seen as not the most not the most right wing of those groups. So
not by far.
Not by far, right? So he was sort of seen as the moderate, which I think helps in the general election, but you have to get through a primary, right? So I think that marketing yourself as a, governor who's tough on the Democrats and willing to veto all of these useless policies probably helps him.
Let's talk about the elephant in the Capitol building, which was the A's special session, the one where the Oakland A's came with a little cap and said, please, sir, may we have all your public monies? And we promised to build this wonderful thing. The A's special session got the most public debate in the shortest amount of time. Quite a few lawmakers on the Dem side ended up voting for the bill. What happened here, April? What was the horse trading? What didn't we see as the public?
We didn't see almost all of it. We didn't see, honestly. And I think when I was on here last talking about the A's thing, Vogue sort of mentioned that she thought it was a done deal because you wouldn't call the special session unless you would have had it.
She's so smart.
And you know what?
I love my co-host. So smart.
And I think she was sort of dead on. But I will say that I think that the push was really hard. Like, I think that it was not where it should have been when they started it for that. They passed in special sessions deals that were much bigger than this Oakland A's project in a shorter amount of time. Like, Tesla was like 2 days, you guys. Like, it's crazy. So I think there was a lot of pushback, and there was a lot of people who were very uncomfortable with the idea for whatever reason. I think because largely it's really unpopular among everyday Nevadans, right? What exactly the horse trading was is behind closed doors because they don't have to be open about it, and it's all that. I think there are some things we know. They resurrected a bill that Lombardo had vetoed that would require any companies receiving tax abatements from the state to offer paid family medical leave. So that's a really small bar in terms of expanding paid family medical leave. So we saw things like that. But I think largely it was pushing from the labor unions and the groups that did want it.
I mean, the part that came out to me that was so upsetting was what were the A's willing to give? Steve Yeager, the Speaker of the Assembly, came out and said, look, we've got the best public benefits package that anyone's ever had in the history of this government. I'm just like, how could you say this was so transparent and so discussed when we don't even know what the A's were willing to do or what the A's were bringing to the table or what was, like you said, traded on and off, especially with all that union involvement?
Mm-hmm. And I wish I had the answers to that, but it was really closed off.
You don't have the answers? Can we get another guest? I want a guest with those answers. I want to know what was said behind closed doors. April, you call yourself a journalist.
Invite John Fisher to the podcast.
He wasn't even there. How would
he wasn't
know?
Even there. He's
the president of the owner of the A's, rather, was not even present. Didn't even bother the show.
Super shy, media shy, and just sort of keeps to himself.
Oh, yeah. The shy billionaire. Those always work out so well for Nevada.
The shy billionaire. Yeah. And I think the most fascinating thing is that if you look at beyond the public subsidy, just the fact that most people in the baseball community and the sports community, like, do not think of John Fisher as a good owner. Like, I think there's a general sentiment that, like, the MLB league and them just sort of want to shove John Fisher away from Oakland and shove him somewhere else. And they pick Nevada because we're suckers. That's like a narrative that you've seen across, which is not great. So you'll see a lot of hemming and hawing about the community benefits agreement. But again, it's so minimal. Like, it's like a promise that we will hire 15% of companies that are diverse or whatever. And it's a promise that, like, we will give it's either $2 million or 1% of ticket sales, whichever is greater, will give that back to the community in like nonprofit stuff and like to support Little League. But you like say that 1%. So you're talking about like, we'll give 1%, but they're also getting LET, live entertainment tax exemption, which is 9% of ticket sales. Yeah. So like, okay, we're not winning here, guys. Like in the long run, right? They're deeper conversations that we
One
could have
step forward, 8 steps back. That's what that sounds like.
Exactly.
Oy.
You know, we can come back and have a whole episode about reforms that could make the whole system better. But certainly that's why I started this episode talking about hell and our descent through it, because this last 120 days plus really showed you all of the bad things that can happen and the factors that lead into it. So, yeah, I wish I had answers, but I don't.
Oh, no, you've got lots of answers, April, and we'll look forward to having you deliver more of those as the weeks and months come upon us. April Corbin Girnus, thank you so much for coming back to CityCast Las Vegas, breaking it down. Love it.
Always a pleasure.
Before you go, a few things you should know. What's going on, Vogue?
So on Tuesday, the Public Utilities Commission heard consumer comments on a proposed 3.3% NV Energy rate hike. In these public hearings, many Nevadans said they're worried about choosing between paying their power bills and paying for other basic needs such as health care. NV Energy issued a statement saying that the increase is needed to cover the $92.7 million spent in 2022 when they purchased natural gas and power. Also, as the Oakland A's are probably going to move to Vegas, federal lawmakers are re-examining Major League Baseball's antitrust exemption. That's a ruling that has allowed the league to function as a legal monopoly for over a century. So last week, California Representative Barbara Lee introduced the Moneyball Act, which would require a relocating team to compensate the community it leaves behind.
That's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed the show, here's what I want you to do. Send this episode to 3 friends who don't know about CityCast Las Vegas yet. If just 1/3 of you listening does this, we're going to double our listenership. That's math. Also, you'll help us reach new ears and share a great show with people you like. Win-win. Hey, we'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Take care. What a great conversation with 2 people, one who's really super smart and the other one who's sitting in his closet.
I am also in my closet.
Oh, 2 people in their closet, one who's super smart wearing glasses.
Yeah, okay, there you go.